Welcome to Here's the Deal. I'm Laura Barnes with Leadership Beyond Sport, and today's pod chunk is going to talk about conditioning. If you're an athlete, take a breath, it's okay. We're not going to talk about wind sprints, jumping jacks, or push-ups in cadence. None of that. Although those are all great things and I highly encourage and recommend them. No, today we're going to talk about conditioning that happens throughout our lives that impacts who we are and how we show up in the world, as well as how we react to the world around us. Today's talk is really more about awareness and creating that awareness, doing some introspection. I will also say that sometimes the things that have conditioned us are not pleasant. They can be negative, they can be traumatic. If that applies to you, I strongly recommend, I implore you to reach out for help if you have not already. To work with a mental health professional who can help you process through whatever's happened to you so that you can come out stronger on the other side. If you need resources, if you need insight, if you need support in finding those resources, please do not hesitate to reach out to me, and I would be more than happy to put you in contact with resources, opportunities, and ways to get the support you need. Okay, let's jump into conditioning. Thinking about this in terms of awareness, conditioning is essentially you are the sum of your experiences. Every environment you've ever been to, every relationship you've ever been in, whether it was romantic, friendship, family, every place you've ever lived, every job you've ever had, all of those situations impact and condition you to be the person you are today. So that might look something like being conditioned, as I was as a child, that dinner was eaten together as a family every night at the dinner table. We cooked dinner together, we sat down and ate together, we cleaned up, or cleanup was divided among the kids, but dinner was a family event. So that's what I was conditioned to believe was normal. That was typical for me. That's how I was raised. That's what I thought every family did until I started going to sleepovers in middle school and high school. And my friends would go to the kitchen and get their food and then go to their rooms and watch TV in their rooms. Or maybe the whole family would sit in the living room and eat dinner while watching TV in the living room together, but really just watching TV. And I was blown away. Blown away. I did not realize that A, you could have more than one TV in a house, or B, that it was okay to eat dinner in front of the TV or eat dinner in your bedroom. And I actually realized that I was the minority. I was the atypical, the abnormal one, because the majority of my friends, that was their life. That was their experience and their conditioning. So they were conditioned to believe that it was completely normal to not eat dinner together as a family, to not have conversations at the end of the day, and to not spend that much time together. Again, growing up, I had one TV in my house. So if anybody was watching TV, it was a family thing. We were all watching the same thing. So that's just one very simple example of conditioning. Conditioning can also happen in the workplace. If you have a boss who is very challenging to work with, maybe they're really harsh in their criticisms, maybe they don't give good feedback, maybe it's really difficult to understand what their needs are. Maybe they have very high highs and very low lows. I've worked for those bosses, so I know that they exist. They're not all of them, but they do exist. Having those experiences and working for people like that, even when you leave that work environment and you start a new job in a new company with new expectations and a new energy or feeling around it, you might still carry some of that with you. Maybe there's a fear of making a mistake because your last boss was so harsh and so critical that if you ever made a mistake, they made you feel absolutely terrible about it. Whereas in your new environment, mistakes are welcome because it's a part of the growth process. It's expected. You're not perfect. You're going to make a mistake. That's fine. We'll learn from it and we'll move on. Two completely different dynamics and ways of approaching work. But if your first or your early experiences were with the bosses who never wanted you to make a mistake, everything had to be perfect, you were expected to be on 100% of the time, to go into an environment where it's okay to make a mistake is going to be really different for you. And the converse is also true. If you worked in an environment where it was okay to make mistakes, where your boss was really understanding and wanted to coach you through things and support you and help develop you as an individual so that you could move up in the company or move up in your career or accomplish your goals, that's a really supportive awesome environment to work in. And if you go from that experience to working for a boss or an organization where mistakes aren't tolerated, nobody cares about your growth, you show up and you do your work and that's it, and you do it to the very highest level, completely different energy and vibe and experience. Probably going to start off really excited to work for company B because you came from company A. But then you'll be conditioned that maybe the things you could do before you can't do anymore. So again, conditioning happens at every stage, every phase, every interaction we have. It happens in our personal relationships as well. If you were in a relationship with somebody where maybe communication wasn't the greatest and every conversation led to a fight or an argument, that's going to condition you to be prepared for a fight or an argument and to probably be a little bit more defensive going into certain conversations or situations with a future significant other. So again, these are really just about awarenesses. And I know I talked a lot about the negative things that happen, but there are really great positive experiences as well. If you are a person who has been fortunate enough to have never been abused physically or otherwise in a relationship, then your conditioning is that abuse is not acceptable. Abuse is not normal. Abuse is not tolerated. So again, positive experiences can condition you just the same way that negative experiences can. And when we talk about having this awareness and having the introspection, I've noticed when working with clients, when looking at my own life, that there are themes that will emerge that are the result of conditioning. A great example of this is an ex-boyfriend of mine. When we first got together, he made a point of telling me, all my relationships seem to end after 18 months. Year and a half mark, we're done. And I was like, well, that's really interesting. And that's all I said because I didn't know what else to say. I hadn't been in those relationships, so I didn't know what happened. And there are two sides to every story. So I could only hear his side, and that may or may not have been the truth, right? So fast forward in our relationship to the 16-month mark, things got a little less exciting. There was a little bit of complacency happening. Nothing bad, right? Nobody cheated on anyone. There was no abuse. There was no infidelity. There was no trauma or significant change. It just got a little bit stale, which if you've been in a relationship for any period of time, sometimes relationships get stale. Sometimes you just kind of hit a valley and you're just sort of like going through the motions. Totally happens. It is completely normal. And I'd say 99% of relationships that you're going to go through highs and lows. You're going to go through a cruise control period in your relationship where everything's just going through the motions. We're doing the things. Nothing's really exciting. Nothing's bad. It just is. But this relationship at that point, when things got a little bit just meh, not bad, not great, just meh, suddenly the relationship ended. And I was thinking about it in retrospect because I was like, wow, that's really fascinating. He said his relationships all end at the 18-month mark. And I think ours was at like 17 and a half before it ended. Huh. Now, I'll leave it up to a mental health professional, somebody who's highly trained in this type of area. Maybe he created his own self-fulfilling prophecy. Maybe it was a him thing, not a me thing. I don't know. Two sides to every story again, two people involved in that relationship. Was I a little bit complacent at that point too? Yep. We were going through some shifts and some changes, but they were all shifts that were heading in the right direction. So again, his conditioning was that his relationships end after 18 months or at the 18-month mark. And apparently that was true. That was what he was conditioned to believe was normal. So then it happened, and he probably wasn't that shocked by it. I was, because I didn't think there was anything unfixable about our situation. But I'm also a firm believer that I'm not going to beg someone to be in a relationship with me. So you want out, you can have out. Totally fine. So that's one example of conditioning in relationships and how, again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just an awareness. Where I went, all right. So the next time somebody says to me, my relationships always end with X or always end after X, that's actually now a red flag. I've been conditioned that a person who says that, who has enough self-awareness to realize that that's a problem, but not enough awareness to fix the problem, that's a red flag for me. Another example of conditioning is in the workplace. A client that I was working with a while back had a change in leadership that was unexpected. And while this person was a great performer in their position, everything was fantastic, loved the leadership that they had at the time, a new leader was brought in who was a woman. And before the new leader even started, my client said to me, I've worked for terrible female bosses in the past, and I'm not going to do it again. My client was ready to bail, was ready to be done with the situation, cut ties, move on, find a new job, because of just the simple awareness that a new boss who was a female was coming into the organization. Again, great awareness that you've had terrible female bosses in the past, but the conditioning was a response of, I can't do this isn't going to work, I got to go. My client stayed, things leveled out. It actually was a very great experience overall, and she got the opportunity to, the boss that came in had the opportunity to work with my client had the opportunity to work with the boss. It all worked out really well. There was a symbiotic relationship. There was leadership happening in both directions. It ended up really well for my client. However, the initial response was that of conditioning. I can't work with a terrible female boss, so I'm going to quit. That's another example of, again, how our conditioning impacts us. So how do you develop this awareness? How do you start becoming more aware of what your conditioning is, what the factors are that impact you? Really, you start off with taking a step back. Taking a step back from the situation and thinking to yourself, okay, where have I experienced this before? Maybe it's a work environment, work situation, and you feel like you've had this conversation before. It's almost like deja vu, where you're like, I've had a similar conversation to this and it didn't go well. What was that experience? And being able to understand and connect what you're going through now with what you've gone through in the past. So that's when taking a step back, taking a deep breath, removing yourself a level or two from the situation whenever possible can help you to build that awareness. You can also ask for insight, somebody who you trust, who you've worked with before, and just say, have you ever noticed any themes in my relationships or my conversations or the things I complain about or I'm concerned with at work? Because if it's somebody that you talk to a lot, they probably have noticed some themes. And they can help show you your blind spots, essentially. They can help you to understand, yeah, actually, every time you're stressed out at work, ironically, you and your boyfriend seem to have a fight. Oh, interesting. So that creates an awareness that maybe stress in your work environment creates stress in your personal relationships, which then leads to conflict. So a trusted advisor, a friend, somebody who knows you really well and who you've had in your life for a while can sometimes help you to identify patterns that you may not be able to see on your own. So those are my top 2 practices on how to develop more awareness around what is your conditioning. And sometimes you can even identify how you've worked through conditioning using those same processes. Okay, how did I get through this situation last time? What was the process that I went through? Was it effective or was it not effective? If the process was to break down, to quit the job, to break up with a significant other, to drink yourself into a coma, like whatever your process was, did that work? If it didn't have a great outcome, if it wasn't the best case scenario or a really positive outcome, maybe think about doing something a little differently this time. Maybe think about not getting in an argument. Maybe think about saying to your significant other, you know what, I'm really stressed at work, so can we just not talk about this tonight? I don't think I can really show up for you the way I want to. But having the awareness gives you the opportunity. It's the first step in being able to overcome and change the outcome. You can't change an outcome if you're not aware of the potential, what the potential outcome could be. So having awareness, being able to see how these situations have occurred in your past, what the outcome looked like in that situation, and then saying, okay, I don't want that outcome again. So what can I do differently? How can I show up differently? How can I apply my skills differently? What have I learned and how have I grown and developed since that last time happened? And what can I do now? So keep in mind, conditioning is not always bad. Sometimes conditioning is great. You can be conditioned to be a really positive, optimistic, upbeat person, and that's fantastic. So don't think that everything that's ever happened in your life has probably led to something negative and horrible. I did talk a little bit more about those situations because I think those are the ones that are the most prevalent and the ones that also cause the most challenge. But when you're doing this introspection and when you're starting to realize those are my negative conditioning situations, what are your positive conditioning situations? For me, I can look back on my life and I know that I have an amazing, loving, supportive family and amazing, loving, and supportive friends who have been there for me between my family and my friends. There is always somebody I can call no matter how bad that day is. So there are positive aspects too. There are positive things that I've been conditioned to believe that people love me in my family and friend circle. So that's great, right? I've been conditioned to believe that I can be successful because I've seen success in my life. I was successful in school. I have had successful relationships. I have built successful business relationships and connected with people. I have learned and grown and developed in very positive ways. So I am conditioned to believe that success is an option for me. So those are the kinds of things, the positive trends that you can see in your life that you can start applying. Okay, if I've been successful in that situation, chances are I can also be successful in this situation. How can I apply myself to be successful? So please don't get hung up on conditioning is bad or conditioning is only for negative things, because conditioning really can have a lot of positive elements as well. And I am a huge proponent of retrospection, introspection, and retrospection. So thinking about your past, thinking about what you've done previously, and also thinking about who am I? Like, who are you? What has led you to this point? Because even the negative things that have happened that have led you to where you are now, where you are now might be pretty awesome. So even those negative experiences or negative situations could have had a positive effect in terms of helping you to overcome, helping you to learn and grow and develop new skills, develop resilience, develop the ability to be who you are. And who you are is pretty awesome. We all have room for improvement, but who you are is pretty awesome. So never forget that. Thank you so much for joining me today on Here's the Deal. Can't wait to see you next time.